Hope you're having a great day. And as always, if you want to make my day great, please hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. So in the world of cyberpunk, the most prominent mental illness is the one known as cyberpsychosis. But what exactly is cyberpsychosis, and what does it actually mean to go cyberpsycho? That was left a little vague, but I want to dig into it today and explain exactly what cyberpsychosis is, both from a tabletop game mechanic perspective and from a video game / anime perspective, because both the game and the anime deal with cyberpsychosis a lot, but they never actually explain what it is. So please join me as I try to deconstruct and break down exactly what this is, and what does it mean for the player, and what does it mean from a game perspective. So right from the beginning, let me just say that the human mind is an incredibly fascinating and simultaneously terrifying place. The human mind is incapable of exceptional things. It is the world's first and only, to my knowledge, bio supercomputer. It weighs 3 pounds and is capable of multiple simultaneous complex equations at the same time. Just the act of a human being walking needs several calculations per second, and your brain handles that completely seamlessly. It is the absolute king of multitasking, capable of doing several things at the same time, on top of several things at the same time. So there is nothing quite like the human brain. And unfortunately, like every other part of the body, the brain can get sick. And which is why when it comes to mental illness, medical science is just crawling out of its cave. For a long time, humanity wanted to pretend that mental illness didn't exist. So within the past few decades, we're just really starting to understand how the human mind works, and how the human mind works when it gets sick. So in Cyberpunk, that's where cyberpsychosis comes in. It's by far the most prevalent mental illness in the world. And a very basic explanation of it is, when you get too much cyberware, when you become too much of a cyborg, you forget what it's like to be human. And that's just scratching the surface of it. But from a tabletop game perspective, what cyberpsychosis represented was a balance issue. It was something to balance out the game and balance out the player. In the tabletop game, you had what's known as your humanity stat, and this was from a number from 100. So what each cyberware not only cost in eddies and stuff to put in your character, it costs humanity. So let's say a cybernetic arm cost 10 humanity. So you would add 10 to your humanity stat. And the way the game balance worked was, the closer you got to 100, the more likely you would go cyberpsycho, and the more likely you would suffer adverse effects, like you would have to make different rolls and stuff like that to ensure that you stayed sane. Which is why most players I know never went beyond, say, 50 humanity, because they didn't want to have those adverse rolls, they didn't want to have penalties, they didn't want to get anywhere near going cyberpsycho. Because once you crossed that threshold of 100 humanity, your character went cyberpsycho. And what that meant was, at least in the way we played the game, was you essentially surrendered your character to the GM to be used as an NPC and killed off in a very spectacular and usually very violent fashion. Now, it is possible through the game mechanics to really ride that line to get as close to 100 as possible and still stay sane. It's very difficult to do. It takes a lot to do it. Various different medicines, various different chemicals, various things in the game world that were very expensive, very difficult, but it was possible. For instance, in the video game, if you ever scan Atom Smasher, you will see that he is 96% cyborg, meaning he has spent 96 humanity points, and he is riding right on that edge. But He's also a very high-value employee of the Arasaka Corporation, so they're giving him the best treatments and the best implants and the best medicine and all that stuff to keep him flat on that line and not go over the edge. So that was an explanation from a tabletop standpoint. It was a balancing stat to ensure that the players didn't get too overpowered, that they didn't just load themselves up with as much cyberware as they possibly could and be these unstoppable killing machines. So it was a checks and balances kind of a thing, and really amounted to little more than just a number on your character sheet. Now, the way me and my friends played the tabletop game, you didn't run into too many instances of cyberpsychos out in the world. They were usually, if it happened at all, Night City PD put them down fairly quickly. It was a problem that was contained, but not really solved. Whereas in the video game and the anime, they kind of want to make you believe that cyberpsychos are happening all over the place all the time, and it's a major issue. So, again, might have been just the way we ran the tabletop game, but it didn't really happen all that often in the tabletop. Like, you would hear stories about it, you would hear, Max Tack put one down or something like that, but you didn't walk down the street and just bump into a cyberpsycho. Also, a major difference that the anime points out, the anime Cyberpunk Edgerunners, is they kind of want you to believe that just one piece of cyberware can cause you to go cyberpsycho. And technically, while possible, the risk of that is very, very, very low. If all it took was one piece of cyberware, then the whole city would be at risk of going nuts, and that just doesn't happen. But what does it actually mean to go cyberpsycho? Like I said in the beginning of the video, it's essentially you forget what it's like to be human, but there's more to that. There is nuance. First of all, there is the age-old problem of the human body rejecting any sort of replacements. For the most part, they've gotten around this problem in the world of Cyberpunk, but the more cyberware you add to yourself, the more your psyche and the more your brain starts to reject what's happening to you. It's very much kind of like phantom limb syndrome. When someone has a limb amputated, they have said that they can still feel that limb. And that's similar to what is going on in Cyberpunk and a part of the cyberpsychosis. Your brain knows what is supposed to be there, but now something different is there. You will look at your hand, your cybernetic hand, and it's not your hand, but it's on your body. So a big part of cyberpsychosis is the body dysmorphia that comes with having your body parts replaced. Another huge factor for cyberpsychosis is any previous mental illnesses. Cyberpsychosis is often triggered by PTSD, which is why a lot of times soldiers go cyberpsycho. They have post-traumatic stress disorder, and that just makes everything worse. So the symptoms of cyberpsychosis, number one, first and foremost, is extreme violence. The patient has a tendency towards extreme, explosive, violent outbursts with lack of empathy. They don't care the damage they cause. They don't care what they do during these violent outbursts. Another symptom is hallucinations. The patient will fall into these visions and hallucinations of things that aren't actually happening. More often than not, these hallucinations are violent in nature, which only adds to their physical violent tendencies. The third symptom is the patient will temporarily lose the ability to tell the difference between right and wrong. They will lose complete control over their morality, their internal brain function that tells them what is right and what is wrong, which is why more often than not you have these incredibly violent acts, these incredibly criminal in nature, because they just don't understand anymore what is right and what is wrong. And the last symptom that we usually see is a complete lack of empathy and a complete lack of being able to relate to other human beings on an emotional level. Any sort of empathy or any sort of feeling sorry for someone or any sort of function like that is completely removed from someone when they go cyberpsycho. They stop relating to their fellow human beings on an emotional level. So what we have when someone succumbs to cyberpsychosis is someone reverting back in their mind to almost their primal brain, their primal instincts, something that has been suppressed in humanity for thousands and thousands of years. They kind of revert back to that primate brain. Because an interesting thing about the makeup of the human brain is, at a fundamental base primal level, we cannot tell the difference between fantasy and reality. It is our higher brain functions that we have developed that tell us, hey, this is fake, this is not real. That is missing in our base primal brain. It's actually really fascinating when you research it and when you think about it. So people that succumb to cyberpsychosis almost revert back to that primitive brain of the brain going into survival mode and being hyper defensive, being hyper violent in a misguided attempt to protect itself. Because unfortunately, as grand as the human brain is, sometimes it does things that are counter to its best interest to try and survive. For instance, in a dire situation like extreme cold, if you're exposed to extreme cold for a long period of time, the human brain will actually sacrifice parts of its own body to try and survive. Which, in the long run, is not necessarily in your best interest, but it's just how the brain works. It will preserve itself at all cost. So there are several factors that come together to make someone succumb to cyberpsychosis, and the big two are way too much cyberware, where the human brain has trouble differentiating exactly what its body is, and underlying untreated mental illness. In the anime, David, in his case, the reason why he struggled so badly with cyberpsychosis is, well, number one, he has basically replaced everything in his body except his torso, which contains his vital organs, and his head. That, combined with his mental illnesses, struggling with depression and loneliness, that's what caused him to struggle with cyberpsychosis. And unfortunately, the life of the average edge runner is filled with violence. It's filled with horrible things. You're essentially a mercenary, and violence and killing is commonplace. So being exposed to that on a regular basis takes its toll on the human psyche as well. Which is why more often than not we see cyberpsychosis in someone in that kind of profession. You see it more often in soldiers, you see it more often in edge runners who do this kind of mercenary work, and you don't see it as much in, let's say, your average office worker, which has a half a dozen implants to make them more productive, because they lead a rather mundane life. So any kind of untreated mental illness contributes significantly to the chances of going cyberpsycho. And given the fact that the people in these professions, the soldiers, the edge runners, the mercenaries, tend to have high-powered weapons and tactical gear and all that fun stuff as just, a part of their trade, that's when they become incredibly dangerous when they go cyberpsycho. Your average, let's say, bum on the street that succumbs to cyberpsychosis isn't half as dangerous as a fully kitted out soldier or edge runner. So it's a really fascinating thing to think about, and I hope I have shed some light on what it means, not only the definition of cyberpsychosis, but what actually happens when these people go cyberpsycho. And I hope you enjoyed it, and if you liked it, please give me a like, please subscribe to my channel, please consider the Patreon down below if you can, it helps a ton. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care, and stay safe. Hey everybody, if you made it this far into the video, thank you so very much for watching. Seriously, every view on my video is a treasure. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. Also, check out the links below for some goodies, some merch, and all that fun stuff. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.